The sun was setting over Whispering Pines when Eleanor Campbell stood trembling on Sheriff Wallace's doorstep, her hand raised to knock, but frozen with fear. The truth she carried could get her killed, or worse dismissed, as just another hysterical woman in a town that had already decided her fate. It was 1878, and the West was no place for a woman alone, especially one with accusations against the most powerful man in the territory. Eleanor had arrived in Whispering Pines just 6 months prior, a schoolteacher from Boston seeking a fresh start after her parents' passing left her with nothing but debts and memories. The town had welcomed her at first. A proper, educated woman to teach their children was a rarity in these parts, but that was before she witnessed something she shouldn't have. Eleanor finally knocked, 3 sharp raps against the weathered wood. Sheriff Wallace opened the door with a scowl that only deepened when he saw who stood before him. "Miss Campbell, what can I do for you at this hour?" His voice carried none of the respect he'd shown when she first arrived in town. "Sheriff, I need to speak with you. It's about Mayor Holden." Her voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "I saw something last night. Something terrible." The sheriff sighed, but stepped aside to let her in. His office was sparse, a desk cluttered with wanted posters and telegrams, a wooden chair, and a small stove in the corner. A pair of shackles hung on the wall, a reminder of the law's presence in this lawless territory. "Sit down, Miss Campbell." He didn't offer her tea or coffee. "Now, what's this about?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "Last night, I was returning from visiting Sarah Johnson's new baby. I took the path behind the saloon. I know it's not proper, but it saves nearly 20 minutes of walking." She twisted her hands in her lap. "That's when I saw Mayor Holden meeting with those men, the same ones who've been threatening the miners who won't sell their claims." Sheriff Wallace's expression hardened. "Those are serious accusations, Miss Campbell." "I know what I saw, Sheriff. The mayor was giving them money and pointing to a map. He said, 'Make it look like an accident this time.' Then he saw me and—" She shuddered at the memory of Mayor Holden's cold eyes finding hers in the darkness. "Did anyone else see this meeting?" Eleanor shook her head. "No, sir." The sheriff leaned back in his chair, studying her. "So, you're telling me that Mayor Holden, a respected businessman who built this town from nothing, is conspiring to harm honest miners? Based on some conversation you overheard in the dark? Behind a saloon where no respectable woman should be walking alone." Put that way, even Eleanor could hear how it sounded. But she knew what she'd seen. "Yes, sir. That's exactly what I'm saying." Sheriff Wallace stood up, signaling the end of their conversation. "Miss Campbell, I've known Jefferson Holden for 15 years. He's brought prosperity to this town when others were ghost towns. He's funded the school where you teach. And you're accusing him of criminal conspiracy based on a snippet of conversation you misunderstood." "I didn't misunderstand. I think you did." His voice was firm, but not unkind. "You're new here. You don't understand how things work in the West. Men talk roughly, make jokes that might sound alarming to Eastern ears. That doesn't make them criminals." Eleanor stood, indignation rising in her chest. "Sheriff, there have been 3 accidents at the mines this month alone. 3 good men dead. And last week, the Miller family's homestead burned to the ground after Mr. Miller refused to sell to the mayor." The sheriff's patience visibly thinned. "Coincidences. Mining is dangerous work and prairie fires happen. These weren't coincidences. The mayor is. That's enough." Sheriff Wallace's fist came down on his desk. "Miss Campbell, I've shown you respect as our schoolteacher, but I won't sit here and listen to you slander the town's most upstanding citizen. You're overtired and letting your imagination run wild." Eleanor felt her cheeks burn with humiliation and anger. "So you won't investigate?" "There's nothing to investigate. And if you value your position in this community, you'll keep these wild stories to yourself." His meaning was clear. Continue spreading these accusations, and she would lose everything. With as much dignity as she could muster, Eleanor left the sheriff's office. Night had fallen completely now, the main street lit only by the yellow glow from saloon windows and the occasional lantern hanging outside a shop. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, feeling more alone than ever. "Miss Campbell." The deep voice startled her. She spun around to find a tall figure emerging from the shadows beside the jailhouse. Her heart raced, fear mingling with the lingering anger from her conversation with the sheriff. "Who's there?" Her voice sounded braver than she felt. The man stepped into the pool of light cast by the sheriff's window. Heath Morgan stood before her, his hat tipped back to reveal piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. She knew him by reputation, a cowboy who worked at the Double R ranch outside town, known for keeping to himself, but fair in his dealings. They'd exchanged pleasantries at church socials, and when he occasionally escorted his employer's children to school, but little more. "Forgive me for startling you, madam." His voice was low, meant only for her ears. "I couldn't help overhearing your conversation with the sheriff." Eleanor stiffened. "Eavesdropping is hardly the behavior of a gentleman, Mr. Morgan." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Never claimed to be one, madam. But I do know the difference between right and wrong." He glanced around the empty street before continuing. "And I know you're not lying about the mayor." Hope sparked in Eleanor's chest, but wariness quickly dampened it. "How would you know that?" "Because I've seen things too. Been watching the mayor and his men for months now." He took a step closer. "Sheriff Wallace won't help you, he's too deep in Holden's pocket. But I will." "Why would you help me? You barely know me." Heath's expression turned grim. "My brother worked the Sullivan mine. The support beams that accidentally gave way last month? They were solid oak, inspected just days before. Thomas knew those mines better than anyone." Understanding dawned on Eleanor. "Your brother was one of the men who died." Heath nodded, pain flashing across his features. "I've been gathering evidence, but I'm just a cowhand. No one would listen to me. But you're respected in town." Eleanor laughed bitterly. "Not anymore. You heard the sheriff. They'll call me a liar or worse, a hysterical woman who doesn't understand the ways of the West." Heath's eyes locked with hers, determination evident in every line of his face. "Then I'll tell it with you. Between the two of us, we'll make them listen." For the first time since witnessing the mayor's midnight meeting, Eleanor felt something other than fear, a flicker of hope, fragile but real. "It won't be easy," she warned. "The mayor has influence everywhere." "Nothing worth doing ever is, Miss Campbell." Heath offered his arm. "May I walk you home?" "It's not safe for you to be alone now that the mayor knows you saw him." Eleanor hesitated only briefly before placing her hand on his arm. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan." "Heath," he corrected gently. "Eleanor," she replied, a small smile touching her lips despite the danger that surrounded them. As they walked through the quiet streets toward the modest boarding house where Eleanor rented a room, neither spoke of the risk they were taking or the unlikely alliance they'd just formed. But both felt the weight of it and the strange comfort of no longer standing alone. Dawn broke over Whispering Pines, painting the wooden buildings in soft gold. Eleanor sat at her small desk, penning a letter to her cousin in Boston, a contingency she hoped would never be needed, but prudence demanded. If anything happened to her, someone should know the truth. A soft knock at her door startled her. Mrs. Pembroke, her landlady, stood in the hallway with a basket covered by a checkered cloth. "This was left for you at the back door, Miss Campbell." No note. The older woman's eyes held curiosity, but she asked no questions, which Eleanor appreciated now more than ever. Alone again, Eleanor uncovered the basket to find fresh biscuits, a jar of preserves, and beneath them, folded papers. Her hands trembled as she unfolded them, a deed transfer showing Mayor Holden's acquisition of the Sullivan mine just days after the accident, and a list of names and dates. Evidence, just as Heath had promised. At the bottom was a hastily scrawled note: "Meet me at Widow Parker's farm at noon." Follow the creek path safer than the main road.
Ashim.
Eleanor taught her morning lessons with forced cheerfulness, trying not to notice the whispers among the parents who dropped off their children or the way some avoided meeting her eyes. News traveled fast in small towns. By now, everyone knew she had accused the mayor of wrongdoing and that the sheriff had dismissed her claims. At midday, she told her students to enjoy their lunch outside, claiming a headache that wasn't entirely fabricated. Once they were gone, she slipped out the back door and made her way to the creek path that wound behind the school and eventually led to the Parker farm at the edge of town. The widow's property came into view after 20 minutes of walking a small farmhouse with a vegetable garden and a barn in need of fresh paint. Eleanor hesitated at the edge of the property, suddenly uncertain. What if this was a trap? What if Heath had lied about believing her? You came. Heath's voice came from behind her, and she whirled to find him leading his horse from the tree line. I wasn't sure you would. You took a risk sending that evidence to my boarding house. A calculated one. He tied his horse to the fence post. Mrs. Pembroke's late husband lost his store to one of the mayor's schemes. She won't betray us. The casual us sent a strange flutter through Eleanor's stomach. For so long she had been alone, and now suddenly there was an us, two people against the corruption that had poisoned Whispering Pines. Is Widow Parker part of this too? Eleanor asked, glancing toward the farmhouse. Heath shook his head. She's visiting her daughter in Colorado Territory. I've been looking after her place while she's gone. He gestured toward the barn. We'll be private there. Inside the barn, Heath had set up a small table with maps and papers. Eleanor recognized some as matching those from the basket he'd delivered. You've been investigating for months, she said, seeing the extent of his research. Since Thomas died. Heath pointed to a map of the mining claims surrounding Whispering Pines. The mayor's been buying up everything or causing accidents when people won't sell. Those who do sell get a fraction of what their claims are worth. But why? The mines aren't that profitable from what I've heard. Heath's eyes lit with grim satisfaction. That's what everyone thinks. But look here. He unfolded a surveyor's report. This was in my brother's things. He'd hired a private surveyor from Denver because he didn't trust the town reports. The Sullivan mine isn't just silver, there's a vein of gold running through it. Worth 10 times what the mayor paid his widow. Eleanor studied the maps, connecting pieces in her mind. And the Miller homestead that burned? Sits right above this stretch of a creek. Heath traced a line on the map. Gold deposits all through that soil. Mayor needs that land to complete his holdings. Eleanor felt sick. All those deaths, those families ruined, just for gold. Men have done worse for less out here. Heath's voice was hard. But we're going to stop him.
How?
The sheriff won't listen, and the mayor controls the town council. Heath's face set in determined lines. We go over their heads. The territorial marshal is due in Silverton next week. We bring him evidence he can't ignore. Silverton is 3 days' ride from here, Eleanor pointed out. And the mayor has men watching me. I'll never make it out of town without them following. That's why we need a distraction. Heath leaned against the table, arms crossed. Something to draw attention while you slip away. Eleanor's mind raced through possibilities. The Founders' Day celebration is in 2 days. Everyone will be at the town square. Heath nodded slowly. That could work. While everyone's watching the speeches and festivities, you could ride out the back way. He frowned. But you'd need an escort. It's not safe for a woman alone, especially with what you know. Are you volunteering, Mr. Morgan? Eleanor raised an eyebrow, trying to inject some lightness into their grave planning. Something shifted in Heath's expression, a softening around his eyes that made Eleanor's breath catch. I'd consider it an honor, Miss Campbell. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was ready to name. Eleanor broke eye contact first, turning back to the maps. We'll need to be careful with the evidence. If the mayor's men catch us with these papers. I've made copies of everything important. Heath moved beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. The originals are hidden where no one will find them. Eleanor nodded, trying to ignore the strange awareness of his proximity. We should get back. I need to return to the school before anyone notices I'm gone. I'll walk with you part of the way. Heath began gathering the papers. Take different paths back. We shouldn't be seen together too much. As they stepped outside, Heath suddenly placed a hand on Eleanor's arm, stopping her. There's something you should know before we do this. Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest. What is it? Once we start down this road, the mayor will come after us with everything he has. It won't just be whispers and cold shoulders anymore. His blue eyes held hers, deadly serious. Are you sure you're ready for that? Eleanor thought of her comfortable life in Boston, the society parties and predictable seasons. Then she thought of Thomas Morgan dying in a dark mine, of the Miller children homeless after the fire, of the fear in Mrs. Sullivan's eyes when she accepted the mayor's pittance for her husband's claim. I'm sure, she said simply. Some truths must be told, no matter the cost. Heath studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. I'll meet you behind the church during the Founders' Day speeches. Bring only what you need for the journey. As they parted ways at the creek fork, Eleanor couldn't help but glance back at Heath's retreating figure. She had come west seeking a fresh start, but had never imagined finding a cause worth fighting for or a man willing to stand beside her when all others turned away. The next day passed in a haze of tension. Eleanor taught her lessons, smiled at parents, and pretended not to notice the growing coolness in their greetings. After school, she visited the general store to purchase supplies for the journey: dried beef, hard biscuits, a new canteen, making no effort to hide these normal transactions. Better to appear as if nothing had changed. That evening, as she packed her saddlebags with essentials, a sharp knock came at her door. Eleanor froze, heart pounding. Had they been discovered already? Miss Campbell? Are you in there? It was Sheriff Wallace's voice, gruff and impatient. Eleanor quickly shoved the saddlebags under her bed and smoothed her skirts before opening the door. Sheriff, this is unexpected. The lawman's face was grim beneath his mustache. May I come in? This isn't a social call. Eleanor stepped aside, mind racing through possible scenarios, each worse than the last. Sheriff Wallace removed his hat, but remained standing. I've had some disturbing reports, Miss Campbell. Several people saw you meeting with Heath Morgan yesterday. She kept her expression neutral. Mr. Morgan has been helping me gather specimens for the children's nature studies. He knows the local flora better than most. The sheriff's eyebrows rose. Is that so? Because others say you were seen with maps and papers, looking mighty conspiratorial. People in this town seem to have vivid imaginations, Sheriff. Perhaps that's why you were so quick to dismiss what I saw behind the saloon. Eleanor met his gaze steadily, refusing to show fear. Miss Campbell, I'm trying to help you. For the first time, the sheriff looked genuinely concerned. Morgan is not a man you want to associate with. He's been making wild accusations since his brother's death. Drinking too much, causing trouble. He seemed perfectly sober to me. That's not the point. The sheriff sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. The school board is meeting tonight. There's talk of replacing you if you continue this crusade of yours. I'd hate to see a fine teacher lose her position over a misunderstanding. The threat was clear, but Eleanor found she no longer cared about her position if it meant staying silent. Thank you for the warning, Sheriff. He studied her, seeming to weigh his next words. The mayor asked me to deliver a message as well. He's willing to forgive this unfortunate situation if you publicly retract your accusations at the Founders' Day celebration. Say you were mistaken, that the stress of adjusting to life here affected your judgment. Eleanor's hands clenched into fists at her sides. And if I refuse? Then I can't protect you from what comes next. The sheriff placed his hat back on his head. Think carefully, Miss Campbell. This town was doing just fine before you came. It'll do fine after you're gone. After he left, Eleanor sat on the edge of her bed, trembling with anger and fear. The sheriff's visit confirmed what she already suspected: the corruption ran deeper than just the mayor. The entire town leadership was complicit. A soft tapping at her window made her jump. She cautiously parted the curtains to find Heath crouched on the narrow ledge outside, his face taut with urgency. Eleanor quickly opened the window. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, helping him inside. "The sheriff just left. They know we've been meeting." "It's worse than that." Heath's voice was low and strained. One of the ranch hands overheard the mayor talking with his men. "They're planning something for tomorrow, something to take care of the schoolteacher problem during the celebration." Fear clutched at Eleanor's throat. What kind of something? He didn't hear details, but it doesn't sound like they're planning to simply fire you anymore. Heath ran a hand through his hair, disheveling it further. "We need to leave tonight, not tomorrow." "Tonight?" Eleanor glanced around her small room. "But I'm not ready." "We haven't, Eleanor." Heath took her hands, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "I won't let them hurt you, but we have to go now." The intensity in his eyes sparked something in Eleanor, a realization that this man, whom she barely knew days ago, would risk everything to protect her. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Give me 5 minutes to gather my things." While Eleanor quickly repacked her saddlebags and wrote a hasty note for Mrs. Pembroke, Heath kept watch at the window. The night was dark, clouds obscuring the moon, good for their escape, but it would make traveling difficult. "How will we find our way to Silverton in the dark?" Eleanor asked as she pulled on her riding coat. "We won't go directly to Silverton." Heath helped her with the saddlebags. "I know a place we can stay until morning, an old line shack about 10 miles from here. No one uses it anymore." Eleanor nodded, trying to quell the flutter of nervousness at the thought of spending the night alone with Heath in a remote cabin. She reminded herself that propriety mattered little when her life was in danger. They slipped out through the back of the boarding house, keeping to the shadows between buildings. Heath had left his horse and another mount, a sturdy mare, tied in the small grove behind the church. "The mare belongs to Widow Parker," Heath explained as he helped Eleanor into the saddle. "She won't mind us borrowing her." They rode in silence, taking the creek path out of town before turning west toward the foothills. Eleanor kept glancing back, expecting to see pursuit, but the night remained quiet except for the rhythmic sound of hoofbeats and the occasional call of a night bird. After what seemed like hours of riding, a small cabin emerged from the darkness, little more than a shack with a lean-to-stable attached. Heath dismounted first, checking the surroundings before helping Eleanor down. Her legs wobbled beneath her, unaccustomed to such long hours in the saddle. "Let me," Heath said quietly, catching her elbow to steady her. The simple touch sent warmth through her despite the cool night air. Inside, the cabin was dusty but intact. Heath lit a lantern he found on a shelf, revealing a single room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a narrow bed pushed against the far wall. Eleanor tried not to think about the sleeping arrangements as Heath busied himself starting a fire. "It's not much," he apologized, "but it's dry and the chimneys sound." "It's perfect." Eleanor smiled, unpacking the food she'd brought. "I don't think anyone followed us." "Not yet." Heath's expression remained grim. "But they'll start searching at first light when they find you gone." "And the evidence? Did you bring it?" Heath patted the inside pocket of his coat. "Everything we need to convince the territorial marshal. But Silverton is still 2 days' hard ride from here." Eleanor set their simple meal on the table: dried beef, hard biscuits, and the preserves from Heath's earlier basket. "Then we'll have to ride hard. I won't let the mayor get away with what he's done." As they ate by firelight, Eleanor studied Heath's face, the strong line of his jaw, the way the firelight caught in his eyes. This man had become her ally, her protector, and something more that she wasn't ready to name. "Why did you really decide to help me?" she asked suddenly. "It can't just be about your brother. You could have gone to the marshal yourself." Heath was quiet for a long moment. "When Thomas died, I wanted revenge."
Simple as that.
"I watched the mayor, gathered evidence, planned to confront him." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "Then I saw you that night, standing up to Sheriff Wallace, refusing to back down even when he dismissed you. You wanted justice, not revenge."
It
"Reminded me of the man I used to be." "And what kind of man is that?" Eleanor asked softly. "A better one than I've been lately." Heath's smile was tinged with sadness. "My brother was the good one, honest, hardworking, never looking for trouble. After he died, something in me changed. I became bitter, angry." "You had every right to be." Heath shook his head. "Being angry is easy. Finding justice the right way, that's harder." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "You reminded me of that." Eleanor's breath caught at the contact.
I was terrified that night.
"I still am." "That's what makes you brave." Heath's voice dropped lower. "Doing what's right despite the fear." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken feelings. Eleanor withdrew her hand reluctantly, suddenly aware of how improper their situation would appear to anyone in Whispering Pines. "We should get some rest," she said, standing to clear their meager dinner. "We have a long ride tomorrow." Heath nodded, a flash of something disappointment crossing his features. "I'll sleep by the fire. You take the bed." "Thank you." Eleanor hesitated, then added, "Not just for the bed. For everything. For believing me when no one else would." "Truth has a certain sound to it," Heath replied simply. "Once you've heard it, you can't mistake it for anything else." Eleanor slept fitfully, the unfamiliar sounds of the cabin and the knowledge of Heath sleeping just feet away making rest elusive. When dawn's first light filtered through the cabin's single window, she found him already awake, checking their supplies and readying the horses. They set out as the sun crested the eastern hills, riding hard toward Silverton. The terrain grew more rugged as they left the grasslands behind for the foothills that would eventually give way to mountains. Eleanor's entire body ached from the unaccustomed riding, but she said nothing, determined to keep pace. By midday, they reached a high ridge that offered a view back toward Whispering Pines. Heath drew his horse to a stop, scanning the horizon with narrowed eyes. "Riders," he said grimly. "4 of them, coming fast." Eleanor's heart sank. "The mayor's men?" "Has to be. No one else would have reason to follow this trail." Heath gauged the distance. "They're about 2 hours behind us." "Can we outrun them?" Heath shook his head. "Not on these horses. They're already tiring, and those men will have fresh mounts from the relay stations." Eleanor tried to keep the fear from her voice. "What do we do?" Heath studied the terrain ahead. "There's a canyon about an hour's ride from here. Narrow passage, easy to defend. We make our stand there." "Our stand?" Eleanor echoed, the words sending a chill through her. "Heath, we can't fight 4 armed men." His blue eyes met hers, steady and determined. "We won't have to fight all of them. Just convince them the price is too high." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a rifle. "Can you shoot?" Eleanor swallowed hard. "My father taught me. Before he died. But I've never. Let's hope you won't have to." Heath handed her the rifle anyway. "But if it comes to it, aim for the horses, not the men. Unhorsed, they'll have a long walk back." They rode hard for the canyon, the horses laboring up the increasingly steep trail. When they reached the narrow passage Heath had mentioned, Eleanor understood his strategy. The canyon walls rose sharply on either side, creating a natural bottleneck barely wide enough for 2 horses abreast. "We'll leave the horses here," Heath said, dismounting and helping Eleanor down. "There's a cave about 50 yards in that can shelter them." After securing the horses, Heath led Eleanor to a ledge overlooking the canyon entrance. From their vantage point, they could see anyone approaching while remaining partially concealed. "Now we wait," Heath said, checking his revolver. The silence stretched between them, tense with anticipation. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly on the rifle. "Heath," she said finally, "if something happens to me, promise you'll get the evidence to the marshal. Don't let the mayor get away with this." Heath's expression darkened. "Nothing's going to happen to you. But if it does, it won't." He took her hand, his grip warm and sure. "Eleanor, when this is over, when the mayor is brought to justice, I want you to know that The distant sound of hoofbeats cut him off. Heath tensed, releasing her hand to peer over the ledge. "They're coming. Stay low and don't fire unless I tell you." 4 riders appeared at the mouth of the canyon, moving cautiously now. Eleanor recognized 2 of them, the mayor's personal bodyguards who often flanked him at town functions. The other 2 were strangers, hard-faced men with the look of hired guns. "That's far enough," Heath called out, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. The riders halted, hands moving to their weapons. The leader, a burly man with a thick mustache, squinted up at their position. "Morgan, we know you're up there with the schoolteacher. The mayor just wants to talk." "With 4 armed men?" "That's some conversation he's planning." Heath's tone was cold. "Turn around and ride back to Whispering Pines. Tell Holden we're taking our evidence to the territorial marshal." The lead rider laughed. "You won't make it to Silverton, Cowboy. Hand over the woman and whatever papers you think you have, and maybe you'll walk away from this." Eleanor felt a surge of anger replace her fear. These men thought her life was a bargaining chip, something to be traded away for the mayor's convenience. "I'm not going anywhere," she called out, ignoring Heath's warning look. "And neither is the evidence against your employer. Murder, fraud, intimidation, the marshal will hear it all." The leader's face darkened. "Have it your way." He turned to his men. "Spread out. Find a way up there." Heath cursed under his breath. So much for talking them down. He looked at Eleanor. "Stay here. I'm going to circle around and make sure they don't flank us." "Be careful," she whispered, fighting the urge to grab his arm, to keep him beside her where she knew he was safe. As Heath disappeared among the rocks, Eleanor tightened her grip on the rifle, watching the men below begin to dismount. The thought of killing anyone, even men who meant her harm, made her stomach churn. But she would defend herself, and Heath if it came to that. Minutes stretched like hours as Eleanor watched 2 of the men begin to climb the canyon wall while the others provided cover. She calculated distances in her mind, remembering her father's lessons about trajectory and wind. A gunshot cracked through the air, not from below, but from somewhere to her right. One of the climbing men cried out, clutching his shoulder before losing his grip and tumbling several feet down the rocky slope. Heath had fired first. The canyon erupted in gunfire. Eleanor ducked lower behind her stone cover, heart pounding. Another shot from Heath's position, and the second climber scrambled back down to safety. "Morgan," the leader shouted. "Last chance to surrender before this gets ugly." Heath's response was another shot, this one splintering the rock near the leader's head. Eleanor saw one of the men below circling toward a gully that might provide access to their position, a route Heath couldn't see from his angle. Without thinking, she raised her rifle, aimed at the ground near the man's feet, and fired. The gunman jumped back in surprise, then dove for cover as Eleanor fired again, closer this time. Her hands were steady now, fear replaced by determined focus. The exchange of gunfire continued for several tense minutes, neither side able to gain advantage, neither willing to retreat. Eleanor reloaded with practiced motions her father had taught her years ago, wondering how long they could maintain this standoff. Then she heard at the distant but unmistakable sound of multiple horses approaching. The mayor's men heard it too, their heads turning toward the canyon entrance. Around the bend came 6 riders, dust billowing behind them. At their head rode a man with a silver star pinned to his Vesta badge that caught the sunlight like a beacon. U.S. Marshal. Lower your weapons. The voice rang with authority that brooked no argument. The mayor's men hesitated, looking to their leader for direction. I said lower them.
Now.
The marshal and his deputies had their rifles trained on the four gunmen. Slowly, reluctantly, the mayor's men placed their weapons on the ground. Heath appeared at Eleanor's side, his face streaked with dirt and sweat, but his eyes bright with relief. Perfect timing, he murmured. But how? Eleanor whispered, watching as the marshal's men dismounted to secure the gunmen. I sent a telegram from Widow Parker's before I came to get you last night. Heath's smile was weary but triumphant. Ask the marshal to meet us here. Wasn't sure he'd make it in time. Eleanor felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. You planned for everything. Not everything. Heath's expression softened as he looked at her. I never planned on you, Eleanor Campbell. Before she could respond, the marshal called up to them. You folks all right up there? We're fine, Marshal Grant. Heath called back. We have evidence you'll want to see. As they made their way down to meet the lawman, Heath took Eleanor's hand, helping her over the rough terrain. But when they reached level ground, he didn't let go. The marshal will want our statements, he said quietly. After that, after all this is over, would you consider staying in these parts? Eleanor looked at him in surprise. Staying? But the school board might see things differently once the mayor is behind bars. Heath's gaze was earnest, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. And if they don't, well, the Double R could use a teacher for the ranch children. The owner's wife has been saying so for years. Eleanor felt a smile bloom on her face, matching the warmth spreading through her chest. Are you offering me a position, Mr. Morgan? I'm offering a lot more than that, Miss Campbell. His voice dropped lower, meant for her ears alone. If you'll have me. In that moment, with the marshal securing their safety and justice within reach, Eleanor made the easiest decision of her life. I think I would like that very much. 3 months later, Eleanor stood on the porch of the newly built schoolhouse at the Double R Ranch, watching children file in for the day's lessons. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine from the nearby hills. So much had changed since that fateful night she'd stood trembling on Sheriff Wallace's doorstep. Mayor Holden now awaited trial in the territorial capital, his schemes exposed and his empire crumbling. Sheriff Wallace had resigned in disgrace, replaced by a deputy the marshal recommended. The miners whose claims had been threatened now worked their land in peace, and the Sullivan mine operated under the cooperative ownership of the miners themselves, including Mrs. Sullivan, who had received her rightful share at last. And Eleanor, she had found a new purpose and a new home here at the Double R. The ranch owner had been delighted to provide land for a proper schoolhouse where both the ranch children and those from neighboring homesteads could learn. Her reputation, far from ruined, had been enhanced by her courage in standing against corruption. Penny for your thoughts? Heath's voice pulled her from her reflections. He climbed the porch steps, handsome in his work clothes, a smudge of dirt on his cheek that Eleanor found inexplicably endearing. Just thinking about how much has changed, she replied, smiling as he leaned against the porch rail beside her. How different my life is now from what I expected when I came west. Better or worse? Heath asked, a teasing light in his eyes. Infinitely better. Eleanor reached up to brush the dirt from his cheek, letting her hand linger. Though I never imagined I'd fall in love with a cowboy who believed in me when no one else would. Heath caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. And I never thought I'd find justice for Thomas through a schoolteacher brave enough to stand up to the whole town. His blue eyes softened with love. They called you a liar, but you told the truth anyway. We told it together, Eleanor corrected, stepping closer to him. And now we have a whole future to write, one day at a time. Heath's arms encircled her waist, holding her close as the school bell rang in the background. "I can't think of anyone I'd rather write it with, Mrs. Morgan." Eleanor smiled at the name she'd taken just a month ago in a simple ceremony attended by the ranch hands, her students, and even Marshall Grant, who'd traveled from Silverton for the occasion. "Nor can I, Mr. Morgan." As the last of the children disappeared into the schoolhouse, Heath stole a quick kiss before Eleanor had to go teach. In that moment, with the mountains rising in the distance and the promise of home waiting at day's end, Eleanor knew she had found what she'd truly been seeking when she journeyed west, not just a fresh start, but a place to belong and a love strong enough to stand against any storm. Truth had brought them together, and truth would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead in this wild, beautiful land they now called home.